Mafia Definitive Edition is a ground-up rebuild of the 2002 Mafia, a cult classic with a small but dedicated fan base. I dipped my toes in it for about an hour before deciding it wasn't for teenaged me, although I did appreciate that a slower-paced game could blur the lines between action and simulation. Patient gamers were rewarded with a well-made and unique adaptation of the Mafia genre, but for video games. It wasn't revolutionary, as movie-like storytelling had been done 4 years prior with the release of Metal Gear Solid.
That's right.
But it did push it forward. Fast forward 18 years later, and Mafia Definitive Edition is released in 2020. A beautifully directed opening cinematic introduces us to Lost Heaven, a fictionalized Chicago in the midst of the Great Depression. While poverty abounds for many citizens, it's also a new century. This technological advancement is seen everywhere. It's an exciting time, and I wish more games were set in it. Unfortunately, exploring Lost Heaven on its own terms reveals a cardboard cutout of sorts. Look too closely, and the seams show themselves.
These Italians are all...
In a gaming ecosystem with the likes of The Witcher, Assassin's Creed, and Red Dead Redemption, Mafia doesn't stand up. Neither the complexity nor the historical accuracy reach heights you haven't seen elsewhere. NPCs are rather stiff, and the city, while containing some beautiful sights, isn't worth too much of your time. NPCs mindlessly wander on predetermined paths with no destination, only reacting to the player if you act violently, and even then, it's not as dynamic as Grand Theft Auto. If you wait for rain, you'll notice NPCs don't have umbrellas. Instead, a kind of taking cover animation gets triggered and they awkwardly shuffle about. Mafia's price tag does cause me to give a little bit of leeway, but in a world where games are constantly on sale, the city here is clearly lacking. The sole exception to this is if you're a diehard fan of the time period. The cars, especially, are gorgeous, both in the attention the developer Hangar 13 has given them and also their classic styling. The most car experience I have is replacing the headlights on my 2005 Honda Civic years ago when I owned a car, but even I caught myself gawking at some of these. It's a shame then that there's no customization for them, or your character for that matter. I do enjoy playing a character with, well, character, a voice, personality, motives, etc. I just wish I could have changed his outfit a bit.
Well, if you're looking to set up a gravy train, you called the wrong cop. I'm not looking for any, associates.
Good. Because I'm on the nut. Can't even pay for the coffee. But I got plenty to trade. I could have had a heart attack. Enough to fix the cab. Nearly enough to buy a new one. I thought about what Sam said about work. I wasn't interested. The money was good, sure, but I didn't want to get in with criminals.
I suspect Hangar 13 knew the cracks of the city would show themselves the more time players spent within it, which may be partially why they included a skip drive ability during missions. I'm of two minds about this. On one hand, I'm absolutely fed up with Rockstar Games dumping exposition on the player before every mission via a long and boring drive or horse ride. On the other hand, skipping straight to missions made Mafia's world feel incredibly small. It placed an even greater weight on the story and gameplay. I see open world games as a spectrum. On one side is Mafia Definitive Edition. The open world is present, and that's absolutely it. It's the bare minimum required to still call itself an open world game. There are 0 activities and just about as much interactivity to be had outside of missions. The open world in this capacity serves no function. I would rather see that effort put into other aspects of the game, and switch it completely to a linear, mission-based structure. On the other side of that spectrum are games like Morrowind, Ultima, and Zelda Breath of the Wild. Not only is the open world an enjoyable space with activities to partake in, but it's absolutely essential to the gameplay. Without an open world, there is no Breath of the Wild. It would need to be rebuilt from the ground up. Consider Mafia Definitive Edition. What's lost by trashing the open world? Long car drives that you already skip? Games like Skyrim and Assassin's Creed attempt to strike a balance. In Skyrim's case, icons dot your compass, appearing as you get within range, incentivizing you to explore. The game's inviting you to wonder, what's just around this corner? Assassin's Creed, on the other hand, urges you to tick all the boxes. The exploration itself is enjoyable, so why not one more map marker? It couldn't hurt, right? And wow, look at that, you're leveling up too. Well, if you insist. As for Mafia, there's nothing. Empty streets dotted with NPCs following a route. Make fun of Oblivion all you want. I know I have, but at least it can say that the citizens of the world lived lives, however basic and glitchy. I'm not asking for Oblivion NPCs in Mafia, but there must be some interactions available to the player in order to justify the open world. Why create a space the player can't interact with? In Hangar 13's case, I suspect the city of New Haven received very little attention relative to the rest of the game. Which, while good, begs the question, why include the city at all then? Would many Mafia purists become enraged by such a move? If so, I argue they're wrong, and the game would be better served with a linear mission structure. I never played the original Mafia enough to give an opinion on it, but, like every game on this channel, I completed the campaign of Definitive Edition, and I will defend the argument that it should not have been open world, as it's a detriment to the game. So with that said, let's dive into the story. The reason anyone is interested in this game. You play as Tommy Angelo, a cabbie running through the motions, when suddenly your life is turned upside down as two on-the-run Mafia mobmen kidnap you and demand a quick getaway. They pay you for your work and invite Tommy back if he ever needs some cash. He's not about to join the criminal underworld though. Well, that is until those he ran from catch up with him a couple days later. Turns out they're from a rival crime family, the Morellos, and they're not too pleased with Tommy helping out another Mafia family. Tommy wants revenge, so he heads back to those who forced his help the first time, the Salieri crime family, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. The two strike a deal, so the Don sends Paulie with you to help. He was one of the guys who kidnapped you earlier. He shows you the ropes by messing up some Morello goons and destroying their cars. You both head back to the Don, who invites Tommy to officially join the family. I was a bit taken aback by how quickly Tommy joins the mob. I know it's a video game and needs justification for the violent, action-packed gameplay, but he joins within the span of, what, a couple days? A week at most? The first night he runs into the Mafia, after they pay him, he goes out of his way to remark, "I thought about what Sam said. The money was good."
Sure, but I didn't want to get in with criminals. Better to be poor and alive than rich and dead.
If you thought Lara Croft in the reboot was quick to violence, you should see Tommy Angelo, driving a cab 1 minute, torching cars and beating mobsters to death with a baseball bat the next. I'd be more understanding if he mentioned having a troubled past, maybe being a violent kid or something, but there's nothing. In Mafia 3, you play a black Vietnam veteran in the Deep South during the late 60s. Now that's someone I'm a bit more understanding towards being violent. Since I'm whining about the protagonist's voice actor has this strange way of ending all of his sentences. I listened to a cast interview, and he doesn't normally do that, so I'm chalking it up to the voice director.
I appreciate that, sir, but I'm not looking for a handout. But I'm willing to make an offer. Come work with us. Change the world. And become a billionaire.
Otherwise, the voice acting is phenomenally done. It's just this one particular quirk. Not a huge deal, but it stands out when the acting is otherwise amazing. What isn't a nitpick, however, is that the protagonist is just kinda there. He joins a Mafia family at the drop of a hat, has no backstory from before being a cabbie. No family, no nothing. I won't be getting into spoilers, but you do eventually marry and have a child by the late game. But you barely interact with them at all. And they don't impact the story outside of being a motivation for the character. To be honest, I didn't even know I had a daughter until the epilogue. This extends to the overall plot. Whether it be Godfather, The Sopranos, or Goodfellas, all great Mafia stories center on the characters and their drama. There is drama here, but you just don't get to know these characters. Maybe you don't believe me. Maybe you played the game and think I'm an idiot. In which case I'll ask you, do you know a single thing about Sam's family, backstory, or aspirations? Because I only got some of his motivations at the very end of the game. I'd also pose that question to you about any of the characters. What you do see is awesome, but I wanted more of it. You spend the most time with Sam and Paulie, the two guys who kidnapped you at the start. You learn a decent amount about Paulie, but I couldn't tell you much about Sam. If you're going to make some changes to the story, I wish they would have expanded on it even more. I understand it's incredibly expensive, far more than just throwing out mindless busywork side quests, but it would have gone a long way. Again, spoiler free, but shit hits the fan towards the end of the game, because of course it does. It's a climax, you understand. And I found myself wanting to care more about it. I did, kinda, just not as much as I had hoped. It's a real shame, because otherwise there's wonderful voice acting, well-written dialogue, and interesting dynamics between all the characters. But despite the excellent presentation, there's little substance. Let's take a gander at the other side of the coin, the gameplay. In a nutshell, it's far worse than the above-average story. The gameplay loop generally consists of melee brawls, cover-based shootouts, and driving sequences. Your first encounter entails the previously mentioned getaway chase. Make your way to any number of small construction sites on the road, and a short cutscene will play in which the game removes one pursuer as you continue on. It's an odd design choice to remove player control and essentially win the encounter for you, rather than have you outrun the pursuers yourself. The game does it later on, seeing you break line of sight and then hide until the police are called off. Otherwise, the driving is about what you'd expect. The cars feel appropriately shitty, lumbering beasts of steel that would crush you like a grape if you managed to hit 60 miles an hour. The speed won't impress you, but I'd be lying if I said it wasn't cool driving something original. As for the melee combat, your first Mafia job has you beating a rival Mafia family's goons to death with your fists and a baseball bat. Now, I didn't verify this on any other difficulty other than medium, since that's what I played on, but you can keep pressing the parry button and break the melee combat. Since there's no penalty to attempting to parry, you can just spam it while attacking. It will break the animation as needed, meaning you're invulnerable. Melee combat probably makes up a minority of the gameplay relative to driving and shooting. Shooting is where you'll be spending most of your time. You'll be using a limited, but period-accurate assortment of pistols, shotguns, and rifles. They're lethal, but the shooting is clunky and a clear downgrade from Mafia 3. How a game that came out after Mafia 3 plays worse than it? I'm not sure. I played with a PS5 controller, but I played Mafia 3 with an Xbox One controller, so there shouldn't be any noticeable difference. Briefly trying mouse and keyboard didn't fare much better. There's a bare-bones cover system, but you're better off manually taking cover as it only takes a few shots to kill or be killed. That aspect I really liked, even if it meant frequent deaths during some of the more challenging sections. It was quick to reload and checkpoints are generous. But again, in a world with amazing third-person open-world games, this is difficult to excuse. I could make an exception if the game was a simulator, but it's been almost 20 years, and this new Mafia entry doesn't lean into the simulation aspect nearly enough to call it one. It's really just a story-centric third-person cover shooter. If that sounds appealing to you, then Mafia Definitive Edition may be worth picking up on sale. Just keep in mind, what you see in regards to the characters is what you get. Don't go in expecting character arcs. There is no growth. No one learns anything, and the moral of the story, without spoiling it, fumbles what could have been at least a serviceable end cap to a tale of crime. Thanks so much for watching. If you're still here, please consider liking and subscribing. See you next time.
No more bloodshed, please!
I'm sorry, Father. Consider this an act of divine retribution.
That make us even.